pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You can sit down now.
Okay. I'm just going to wait just a second for Tim. Gave me the signal. Roll call, all board members are present except for Donna, who's excused. Tim is coming, and Dave is joining us via the computer. We do have notification, a proper notification of an open meeting. First action item is recommendation to approve the minutes of the August 19, 2020 regular board meeting and the August 19, 2020 annual meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions on those? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And kudos to Kate on your very first annual meeting minutes. They were very well done.
Thank you.
Did a good job on that. So that one's always tricky because people don't follow directions and give their names. So and then everybody's wearing masks on top of it. So
Well, she just made those names up.
yeah, that's true.
Right, John Doe.
Oh, there's some names you just can't make up.
I just had a meeting in the library and I forgot a sign. Can I get through?
Yeah, you can go through that way. Adam, you want to?
Yeah.
Okay, next action item is a resolution to approve the bill list.
I'll make a motion to approve the bill list. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any question on the bill list? Hearing none, all in favor state aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next is communication and comments from members of the public. Nobody signed up, I don't think, right?
No.
Okay. All right, moving on to superintendent's report.
I want to start my report just giving a brief update about the beginning of the 2020-2021 school year. And to begin with, I just want to stress it is delightful to have kids back in the building after so many months and to be able to see students and staff members working together, learning, and it's really great. But with that said, it also is very different with masks on and trying to keep students spread apart in classrooms as much as the classrooms will allow. It definitely looks differently than a typical school year. But kids are engaged and they want to be here. Staff members are engaged, they want to be here. I don't have an incredibly accurate or a final count for our student enrollment because we still have some kids coming in. But the last count was about 1,080 students, which is better than what we were projecting.
2,000.
I mean 2,000. Sorry. 2,000. Yeah, no, 2,080 students in terms of enrollment, and by the third Friday count, we'll know for sure, and we'll report that out to the board.
Laura, how does that work? Will virtuals count?
Yes.
Okay.
The enrollment, so you don't have to have a student in a seat. It's who's enrolled and attending virtually or in person. So as you know, as a board, we have the choice for families, 5 days a week in person or 5 days a week virtual. We have about 240 students attending virtually. So of that 2,080, that's about 11%. And that bounced around a little bit for the first week of school, and now that we're into the second week, we're seeing that settle down a bit. And another thing I just wanted to comment on was really to give our teachers a big hand, a show of appreciation. They are working so hard. Most teachers in at least a couple of their courses have students virtual. So they may be teaching 25, 27 kids in the classroom and maybe 2 that are on a computer and watching them. that doesn't seem like it would be difficult. You just teach and that kid can watch online. If you start thinking about it, they have to get that computer up and running. Some are using a camera, some are using the camera in a computer. They have to make sure that that's on. They're ready to start their class with their 28 live students, and the virtual student in some cases might not be there on time. And so they're still trying to make sure, is the student there or not, and they start teaching, and then they're getting buzzed from the office that so-and-so needs to get into the meeting, and they're busy teaching, but the online student was 20 minutes late to class. They're planning curriculum that has to meet the needs of in-person learners and also virtual learners. Even something as simple, well, it seems like it should be simple, an assessment. So let's say it's a written test and you're going to give that to your 27 students in class. Those 2 students learning at home, could they not just look up all the answers? So teachers are needing to redesign their assessments to make sure that they're comparable or the same assessment, but it isn't something that can be, it needs to be valid. So there's really a lot involved in teaching in our blended model, as we call it. And I believe all teachers have the mix of in-person and online students. It might not be for every class period, but every teacher is learning how to do that. And so it is challenging, and I just want to give kudos to our teachers for working so hard to make that work for our students, both the virtual learners and the in-person learners. And then just some other, I guess, general information, not related necessarily to in Arrowhead, but because our pandemic continues and education is challenging, not just the educational piece, but also the health-related piece, the task force that you've heard me talk about, the Waukesha County Task Force that includes all the superintendents from the school districts in our county, and the county executive and the county health department chairperson, and usually 2 or 3 members of his team. We continue to meet every Wednesday morning, and that's been very valuable to just hear the trends in the county in terms of sickness, when our county is spiking high, when it seems to be settling down. Just learning about some mitigation strategies that we've implemented here at Arrowhead, that's been helpful. And then the second half of the meeting is just the superintendents. We used to meet once a month, and now meeting weekly feels invaluable, just to find out what other districts are doing, what's working for them. We've got probably 2/3 that have 5 days a week in person and virtual like Arrowhead. I'd say about 2/3 of the districts in our county, and 1/3 have a hybrid approach where half the students are there at a time. And just hearing the differences and the challenges that each different district is experiencing has been helpful. It's actually almost amusing because we hear from a staff member that one of our world language teachers yesterday has to be home half the week because her child is in a class in a different district where they had to shut down the classroom. So she can be here half the week teaching, but she needs to be home with her 3rd grader the other half of the week. So we're allowing her to teach from home, and we have a monitor in the classroom. It's almost, I shouldn't say humorous, but it's, then when that superintendent started talking about, oh, we had to shut down 2 3rd grade classrooms because of cases, I'm thinking, oh, now I know where that teacher's daughter goes to school. And because our districts we're so intertwined in terms of where people live and where their own children are going to school. The educational setting in 5 different districts right now are impacting our staff members and how often they can be here. So that's something where it has little to nothing to do with disease spread at Arrowhead, but we do have staffing considerations or concerns related to other districts. So it's a complex start to the school year. In general, it's going really, really well. We hope to continue that. So any questions about the start of the year?
In general, talking to some of these other school districts that are doing a split, 3 days in, 2 days out, whatever, to me, that just sounds like so much more complex.
I'm not sure if
Is
it's
there
more
anything-
complex or not. Obviously, the key benefit is just being able to spread out students.
Right.
Because they can have kids 6 feet apart in their classrooms, where we don't have that in most of our classrooms.
I could see where you'd have a problem where you got half your kids in this class are coming Thursday and Friday. I don't know, it just seems a lot more difficult to deal with. Logically to me, I don't know.
Yeah.
Have those communities given the schools feedback that they're not particularly approving of that strategy, or do you know anything about that?
I think it's a mix. We know of some students that actually have come looking and touring Arrowhead because we have in person 5 days a week, and their resident district does not. And so they're looking to perhaps open enroll here. So that's feedback to that district. They're not satisfied and they may go elsewhere. On the other hand, we've had some of our families express concern. They want their kids here in person, but not if there's 30 kids in the classroom with them. So then they're frustrated. Why don't we do like those other 4 or 5 districts and spread them out? Because they don't want just virtual, but they don't feel safe with 30 kids in a room. So it's such an individual preference. And we'll see. I mean, many of the districts that are using that hybrid approach, their plan is to do that for 2 to 4 weeks and kind of a slow entry into in-person. I'm not sure how they'll judge that, because if they have, I believe districts will end up with positive COVID cases. If you have a positive COVID case and you only have half the students there, does that mean you shouldn't have all the students there? You probably would have had the same cases either way. So I feel like we're certainly in unprecedented times, but it almost feels like a big experiment across our whole nation,
It's hard to draw conclusions.
right?
The other thing that logically seems to me is, in a week's time, you're covering half the material you normally would. Because you're covering Monday and Tuesday for half the class. You're covering again that same material on Thursday.
Well, actually
Friday.
not, because half the class is learning in person and the other half are learning virtually.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So the way we're
Okay.
doing it now
Yeah.
is similar, but it might be only a couple of kids.
That makes sense.
And so in most cases, it's just half the time you're in person, and then you can do more of the hands-on work,
I forgot about
or
that.
easier to get help from the teacher. And then the other half of the week, that group A is home learning virtually, and then group B gets to be there to get more interaction with the teacher.
Thanks for clearing that up. I just missed that piece.
Sure.
About the 11% that you mentioned, is there any indication that after time they'll come back, or is there, a target goal? Like, are you doing this the whole semester? Are you doing it a quarter? Or do you eventually plan to come back, or?
Right, we haven't been asking that. We asked families the goal was to make a 9-week commitment, but we also let them know we'll be flexible with that as needs arise. If a student is, let's say they're learning virtually, and after the first couple of weeks, they're just not engaging and they're falling behind, they can come to learn in person. Or let's say it's the opposite. A student is in an in-person classroom, and then a member of the family is ill, or they're just not feeling safe enough. They can switch to virtual. extenuating circumstances will arise, and we want the kids to be learning in the best way they can. We won't allow flip-flopping back and forth. I want Fridays to be virtual, or I want my morning 2 periods to be virtual, and then I'll show up. And we're not going to allow for that. We haven't specifically asked if they want to, how are they feeling? It's just so early in the school year to ask that. We did have, I'd say the week or 2 before school, and then during that first week of school, there was a lot of flip-flopping back and forth. It seemed to me the ones that I dealt with, it was more people that initially were virtual and then decided they wanted their kids in person. Or we had a couple of families that had their kids come the first day to be able to meet the teachers in person, and their plan was to then be virtual. And once the kids were here, then the kids 3 said, I want to be in person.
And then on a side note too, is there any rumblings about after the 3rd Friday that maybe Madison will try to shut the schools down?
I have not heard that, and in fact, from our county, the Waukesha County Executive and Health Director said that they don't envision the county shutting down schools, and they don't envision the state shutting down schools again. It's really going to be an individual district and looking at what works in our district compared to another district, what the data for sickness, the attendance, staffing is probably a more critical factor than illness of students. And certainly, and I don't mean that illness of students isn't important, I mean more critical in terms of being kind of the house of cards that could crumble if you don't have enough teachers because their close contacts or their children's schools are shutting down. That is more likely to force a 2-week closure for us than sickness. And now I should knock on wood because so far we're in good shape in terms of the illness.
Have you had any illnesses happen since school started that, because I know the strategy is like, okay, if that kid gets sick, you have to learn who's sitting 6 feet apart and they have to self-quarantine. Have you had that since the school started at all?
We have, we're keeping a very detailed chart of students, and that gets shared with the county. So every school district is keeping a chart of names and status of students. Right now, we do not have any confirmed positive cases of COVID. We do have some students that are out. It might be a close contact, it might be they weren't feeling well, so they went home and they're being tested, or sometimes you have symptoms that may not be COVID, it might be an allergy, but better find out, kind of a thing.
And pretty soon the flu season's popping up too.
Oh, boy.
Right.
Everybody's not saying if they have the flu, they have the COVID.
Yeah.
How are our students doing as far as wearing the mask, that kind of stuff? The reason I asked, I was at the grocery store this afternoon, and 4 students came in, they're all wearing masks, all that kind of stuff. We walked out about the same time together. And I also, when we were driving out, another 4 of them had their masks on in the car. I thought, okay.
Right.
Okay.
The 6 hours or so that we have students here, they are doing a fabulous job.
Good.
They're keeping their masks on. I'm not sure if they're doing that. I don't want to generalize. I don't know if they feel like that's helping them stay healthy or if it's because it's a rule. Either way, it's going to make a difference. I would think it's going to make a difference in terms of spread of disease, but I also am 100% sure it's making a difference in the confidence level of our staff, feeling like they can be here. But with that said, we have kids 6 to 7 hours a day, depending on co-curriculars. The other 17 or 18 hours a day, we don't have control over that. So we saw that all summer with athletics and clubs. We probably had, 8 to 12 positive COVID cases in students and staff during summer, and not one of them ended up having a close contact within our students because it was apparently contracted from outside of Arrowhead, and then we were keeping kids apart, and so we didn't have lots of close contacts where it's, we've got to shut down a whole lacrosse team or shut down because there were so many kids getting ill. We erred on the side of caution multiple times and shut down like our weightlifting program for a few days, moved it outside. But it wasn't because we had 20, 30, 40 kids that were sick or even close contacts.
I took a motorcycle ride on Saturday afternoon. I managed to work my way through Whitewater, and there were a bunch of parties going on with large groups of kids out in the outside drinking beer and everything else. It's like there was no mask. You weren't doing much as far as social distancing. I thought, oh boy. Anyway, yeah, we can't control that.
Right.
Are pretty much all co-curriculars active at this time? That
Yes.
should be that normally are active at this time?
Yep, there's 3 different sports that were considered the more risky sports, so football, soccer, and field hockey perhaps, that because they're more contact sports, those were delayed by the WIAA by a month. So instead of starting August 7th, they started September 7th, but they're up and running now. Okay, anything else on that topic? The second topic in my superintendent report, there's a link that if you open that up, it's about our referendum communications planning. And so I've provided a general list, a project list of the various ways we plan on communicating about the referendum, and then some timelines. A couple of things that are different from the 2016 and 2017 referendums in terms of communications. One different plan is we've ordered 2,500 business cards, and on those business cards, there's not a lot of information on a business card. It gives the very basics about the referendum and then directs to the website for more information. So we're going to hand those out to staff members. So each staff member will have, 5, 6, 7 to pass around, or if people ask them questions, it's easy to say, here's the website, go to that. So that's different. We didn't try that in the past, but we had from our graphics guy, Zach, who's a marketing and PR person currently in a neighboring district, and then he had worked in a different district. We're using him as a consultant, and so he shared that idea that seemed to work well elsewhere. And then also different from the past 2 referendums, those times we had 2 flyers that hit mailboxes, every mailbox in our residency area. This time we're going to do 3. So, and you can see on the timing, we'll make sure that those mailers will go to residents in, one of them is our aim is for the week of October 12th, so that's before the early voting or the in-person absentee voting. One is the week of October 26th, and then I think I missed one, the end of September. So we're trying to space them out every couple of weeks. 2 should hit households before the early voting because that's become so popular, and then the 3rd one should hit mailboxes, just multiple days before the November 3rd election.
It says 4 of them on there. There's a 1, 2, 2, and a 3.
Well, some of those are just the timing when it's getting finalized.
Yeah, it's like-
So it's 3,
Final section.
yeah, it'll be 3 mailers.
Oh, I see. 2, I see. 1
And then we'll do all of our typical, our referendum information website is up and running. We have a referendum information email address. The last couple times, that was busy. I mean, there would be 2, 3, 4 emails a day on average. So far, there's been no correspondence. So I think once we get the flyers out, that email address will get more active. Our on-point bulletin, our summer bulletin, all the first several pages, as usual, we're celebrating our successes. The final 2 pages in the booklet were completely about the referendum. And I know that at least some citizens read these pages because I did get phone calls with questions. And so that's joyful to me, that people are reading and they want more information. And so I could explain deeper about their questions, and was able to also refer them to the website. So I could explain over the phone, but then I could say, on that website, there's a Q&A document where you can see some of the facts and statistics, or our buildings and grounds plan is on there. Go to the website. And so that's what I would encourage you as board members and our staff members. We're often talking about, if people are asking you questions, certainly share the information that you have. And once we have the additional flyers and business cards, board members will get copies of those. But feel free to have them call me if someone has a question, or go to that website.
Well, has there been any thought of using those business cards and using businesses to distribute them? So, for example, somebody goes to a local restaurant and they take a carryout, the card goes in the bag, for example, something like that.
Right, I haven't asked anyone to do that, about putting it in the bags,
Mm-hmm.
but there are certainly businesses where you can pin it up, or they have little holders where you can take them. So I'll get those, just like these. I'll pass them out to a stack of them to realtors, just for public relations purposes.
I'm just thinking it might be a little bit less passive to actually get them into people's bags rather than
Right.
they'll overlook them if they're sitting
Right,
there.
people may not make the
Yes.
effort to take
Yeah.
one, but if it's there,
Yeah.
they may see it.
Yeah.
Right, good idea.
Well, I spent a fair amount of time today looking at the referendum web page, and there's as I was telling you earlier, there's a wealth of information on there. It's very well done. It's very, very easy to navigate. I mean, kudos to everybody that put the work on that and put it together. I understand Kate has a hand in that as well. It's very well done.
Thank you.
Looks really good.
What kind of questions did you get? Just, if you don't mind asking, from the people that called?
The 2 where I spent the most time, a couple of people, when I said, oh, you can find that document on the webpage, and then they said, oh, I don't need to take your time because then I'll go to the webpage. There were 2 different gentlemen where it was a 20-minute and about a 40-minute call, and they definitely wanted to hear about the needs and why hadn't the district been able to save up for roofing, for HVAC units. So to be able to explain, we've been spending an average of $1.4 million a year on those kind of infrastructure projects, but just can't keep up. And how much roofing we actually have, 12 acres of roofing, and the cost of replacing one HVAC unit can be over $100,000. So to be able to give some details helped, I believe, helped them understand the need and why. And I typically will tell people, a budget is a matter of prioritizing. And so could we spend $3 or $4 million a year on roofing and HVAC units? We could, but that would mean we're prioritizing that way above our educational programs and staffing and so forth. So we've got to really find a balance where we have strong educational programs, staff members, safe facilities, all those different buckets. We've got to find a balance there. And then the other topic that they asked questions about, and they were pleased to hear that on the website there's more information, was about how have we been saving money? Have we done anything? And that's easy to respond to because Arrowhead has done a lot to save money. It's not like, we find ourselves in a need and so we better ask the taxpayers for more. No, Arrowhead has not passed a referendum since 1999, so we're not collecting extra taxes from the taxpayer on a very regular basis, clearly, but we've put, just from staff compensation, we've reduced our budget by $2.5 million in the last 10 or 11 years through changes in our medical insurance plans. Employees are paying more for those now. We've done reductions in other types of services. Even here's one great example, just some of our utilities that we're changing out. Right now, all of the, what do you call them, the parking lot lights, is there a special name? Yeah, so all of our parking lot lights are now being switched over to LED, and the cost that initially we were expecting to pay was about $70,000. It's more like coming in about $17,000 because our own electrician is doing the work. And in 2 to 3 years, they'll pay themselves off, and then we'll just keep saving money. It's about 50% less cost. So Arrowhead's done, we've reduced costs, but we've also found those type of energy savings to try to save costs. We've also tried to increase revenue. So for instance, open enrollment and resident students, even something as simple as starting this a couple of years ago, that's more public relations. It doesn't cost us a lot except time, but if it attracts students in, that's a way to increase revenue. So it's very easy to talk to people that have those questions. Well, what have you done? How are you spending our tax dollars, to talk about how budget conscious we are as a district, and we're not heavy spenders. We also have less tax revenue coming in than most districts around us, but yet our product, our academic achievement, is higher than most districts around us.
Was there still is there still focus on energy program, or is that been killed?
Yeah, we do that.
There's still incentives. They're becoming less and less each year.
So can we help that? Does that help us at all?
It does help offset some of that cost, but it's like the funding is less and less.
Yeah.
You know, the further we have come with energy conservation, the funding has gone away with it. But there's still some there, some incentives.
Good.
So that was an update on our referendum communications, which you'll see during the next few weeks until the election. You'll see revved up quite a bit. And then our last part of the superintendent report is the report on our social justice related curriculum and co-curricular offerings. So I provided the report. I hope you've had some time to review that. I'm just going to do a brief summary, and then I'll ask Sue Casetta to join into that summary and talk more to give the curricular overview specifically. So as the board may recall, during some equity and racially charged events during the summer, local, state, and national events, Arrowhead and other schools were questioned. I guess, yeah, questioned is a good word. Questioned about what are we doing to prevent racism? Do we have equity and race-related courses and curriculum in our school? Should we have more? And so we knew internally, we knew we have a lot of classes that have cultural competence or social justice related curriculum intact already. We also have multiple co-curricular clubs related to equity, social justice. But it caused us to pause and want to respond more thoroughly to those questions. And I talked about it at one of our board meetings, and the board, you as a board, or maybe it was the curriculum committee, I don't remember which, suggested an audit. And let's do a more formalized audit, an internal audit, but to really look at where do we teach this type of curriculum and lessons, in what departments, how much, how long has it been going on, do we have any gaps or holes? And so this report is the end of that process that started last spring. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the report. During our recent audit of curricula across each department related to cultural competence, equity, racial issues, equity and race-related history, responsible civic actions, we were pleased to find high-quality units and lessons are occurring within each of our Arrowhead departments. Some of these units and lessons date back decades, while others have just been added or updated as recently as this summer. Sue will talk a little bit in more detail about the chart that's linked in there, so I'm not going to talk about the curriculum, but I also wanted to draw your attention to co-curricular offerings. As we looked at, we have kids, we have 50 clubs a year, and kids can start clubs if there's enough interest. Some clubs come, some clubs leave or wane because of lack of interest. And even just going through and asking our activities department, so what clubs would be related to these topics? I guess personally I was pleasantly surprised with how many clubs we actually offer that are related to cultural competence or social issues. We have a multicultural student union, we have the Gay Straight Alliance, Best Buddies, Me, Her, Us, SLAM, which is about student leadership, and then all of our world language clubs are very cultural based, and then our world language honor societies, French, German, Spanish. HOSA is a health related club that also has some cultural and social justice topics involved. So I feel like our curriculum's in pretty good shape, our co-curriculars are in pretty good shape, and then next steps for Arrowhead High School. As our local, state, and national communities continue to grow and learn and improve in cultural competency, we will be doing the same. As schools grow, learn, and improve, our communities improve. So as the community improves, our school improves. As the school improves, our community improves. There's no one person or entity that is in charge of this. It really is a team effort. So during this upcoming school year and then beyond, we will, and related to the audit, we'll develop and implement curriculum if and where gaps are found in this recent audit. We'll provide professional development for staff members dedicated to social justice related topics and practices. And then our Arrowhead Way team will work to empower students to be anti-racist, which will include discussions and planning with staff and also working with interested student leaders to determine ways to develop and implement anti-racism behaviors and practices. So Sue, if you could touch on what our departments learned about their
Sure. So as part of the audit this summer, can you guys hear me okay? We asked program leaders to take a look at their programs and identify courses, course standards, topics, books, resources that address what we're addressing in the curriculum as cultural competence. That's a phrase that has been popularized by an author, an ASCD author named Dr. Renita Mayfield, but it is in the literature that really talks about a more broader sense of not necessarily anti-racism falls under that umbrella, social justice falls under that umbrella, but really looking at the norms, the customs, the values, the traditions, the things that are passed on from generation to generation. And we needed that grounding definition for our program leads and programs to really say, okay, these are the things that sort of qualify. Because if you just sliced it as social justice or anti-racism, that may have looked a little bit more narrow, but really this is about a multitude of identities we want to make sure perspectives that are part of our curriculum. So a lot of the emails that many of us received over the course of the spring and summer called upon the Director of Learning, Sue Casetta, to mandate a course in anti-racism. And the research on this topic through educational policies that I've read has said, really you want to contextualize anything. A class won't have as deep of an impact as contextualizing and providing the historical lens or the environmental lens, or depending on the topic of the course, you want to be able to contextualize and it's just more meaningful to students. So as we look at classes we already require, for example, 2 classes in Social Studies 9, which is our freshman Social Studies class. It's split in Civics and Government and Geography. And we looked at the standards by which those classes are to align. You can start to see there are a multitude of places where cultural competence is addressed. And so, for example, in the beginning part of this first semester for Social Studies 9 students, our freshman students, look at the roles and responsibilities of citizens. They look at the rights and privileges associated with the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They look at the purposes of government. And those are all very broad-based topics that certainly you can utilize what's happening in the nation and to determine kind of backtrack those in the historical context and the current context. What is the role and responsibility of a citizen? So that's just one example. In Geography, which is the second part of Social Studies 9, required class for graduation, we don't just do physical geography, right? We do political geography, cultural geography. We understand why something happens somewhere, why a group of people migrate somewhere else, and the impact that has on those that are there as history goes on. So there are lots of opportunities to address those kind of competencies. In English 9 and English 10, which are also required for graduation, the novels and the activities that students engage in lend themselves well to this kind of learning. Again, it's about thinking, it's about asking students to think and consider perspective. It isn't about a way of thinking and we're teaching a way of thinking. It's about opportunities to look at how does the history, how does the novel, how does the piece of literature connect to the things that I'm seeing in the world. So in English 9, students read Of Mice and Men, and certainly for those of you who remember John Steinbeck's novel, Of Mice and Men addresses racism, but certainly other groups like those with disabilities. If you remember Lenny's character, just the time period and the language that is used cause people to connect to, wow, that was written then. What does that look like today? And so those are all opportunities for students to reflect on how they see themselves and how they see their community and and it offers perspective. Our English 10 curriculum does the same, and then beyond. When you look at American Lit, World Lit, Modern Lit, you look at social studies classes like American Problems, Domestic, which looks at what is the American dream? How do people achieve the American dream? And looking at that from a multitude of perspectives. Students have the opportunity to really kind of consider the role of social justice and race. Our global relations, global seminar, and global capstone classes have always had the social justice lens as part of that curriculum. So I guess we always consider our South Campus curricular classes as sort of core foundational classes when we think about academics. But in this case too, it's core, this is part of the foundation building, and then there are many opportunities for students to consider culture throughout our curriculum. So in terms of necessarily gaps, teachers haven't necessarily identified a standard or a particular topic where they feel like this completely needs to change, we need a new course. But I think what they're identifying is we could do something different with choice novels, for example, in English class. We could focus our attention differently to the themes that we've already have in place. I know that some of the discussion we've had is about the diversity of our authors that we present to students for the opportunity to read. It's all about choice and opportunity and giving a chance for kids to kind of consider those different perspectives. We have those anchor texts that allow for a lot of the core skills to be read, and then when given the choice, I think those themes will emerge and some of the changes that our teachers are looking at providing. In United States History class, which is also a class required for graduation, of course, this is kind of key and core. So those teachers have really been very focused this summer in making sure this is curriculum they've taught forever, right? All the way from the dawn of the Republic to the Civil War through the Civil Rights Movement. This is not history we have not covered. We definitely covered it in depth. But the opportunity to connect the dots between what they're seeing in the current events, the curriculum somewhat writes itself in that way. And again, it's not about teaching students how to think about something, it's about just providing the opportunity for them to consider, what do I think about that? How do I see these events connect to the things that I'm learning in a history class? So I think between what's written in our curriculum and what we are asking students to consider and the opportunities that they have through co-curricular events and just things that we're trying to do within school culture, I think we've identified we're making some good incremental steps for our community. It's hard to hear those stories of students who felt marginalized or students who've gone on to outside of the Heartland area and said, oh, this is because of my experience at Arrowhead. Our teachers, that isn't at the core value of our mission and vision to say I felt like I had this experience that was not positive. So I think everybody just wants to make sure that the opportunities that we're presenting students do provide those thinking opportunities outside of the what is their known perspective, and always offering some opportunities for different perspectives, whether they be global or national. So in the chart, it isn't like this exhaustive, in-depth written analysis, but you can see some pieces that I think that really stand out, especially in those areas that I've identified in those required classes. Even beyond social studies and English, as you look at some of the elective departments, certainly world languages hits on a lot of those norms and cultural experiences, not just connected to language, but connected to places around the world. So I think we feel good about the opportunities we have for students. We're going to continue this year to take a look at those strong connections that we're asking students to consider to both history, literature, and what's happening currently. So I think that's kind of my summary. Any questions?
I have a question, not so much about this audit. First, I think it was very well done because it was something we asked for to make sure, in light of some of the comments that were made at that one school board meeting, but it was helpful to understand what exactly on our level what's going on in the classroom and stuff. I think the other part of an audit basically is did some of those things that people were saying at that meeting, did that surprise anybody in the administration here? Like, not so much about what was or wasn't taught in a classroom as much as the bullying issues, the comments made to some of our minority students and stuff. We all know that it doesn't always get reported, so telling us 3 years later doesn't really help. We get that. But it also does give us an opportunity to look at and say, are we messaging anti-bullying? How are we messaging that? Can we do some more of that? Can we do better at it? Those that's part of the audit as well, that these kids, and any kid in our school, should be able to freely report bullying situation as an example, and that a prompt, fair investigation is going to be done about it. And I get telling us 3 years later, 4 years later, we can't do something about that because those kids are probably gone anyways. But are we doing enough to build a climate inside the walls of the school that kids feel comfortable they can report this and know something's going to be done about it?
I think I can address that one. Yeah, we take a very strong stance on bullying and any of the derogatory comments that may be made or racist or sexist comments. I personally was majorly bullied when I was in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And so to me, it's something that it's worth me, and I will, I want to stop it down as much as possible. I think that what ends up happening is I think people don't realize when it's happening, and when they go off to college and they start talking to their friends about it, they go, oh, well, okay, that was bullying. I didn't realize it, or they were being derogatory toward me. A lot of the comments that we got in there were things that people, like, their eyes opened once they left here. So I'll give you an example. There was a young man here, this is a number of years ago, who is Jewish, and his friends all called him Jew boy. And he didn't think there was anything wrong with that. And when he was a sophomore, and well, when I heard about it, I'm like, okay, this is going to happen tomorrow. I don't care if he's blind. We're going to get on top of it. And we got on top of it, and I had him talk to one of our counselors who happens to be Jewish. So she could kind of give a little bit of perspective. And called parents, let the parents know what was happening, and it stopped. We nipped it in the bud. He's probably somebody who would have come back if we hadn't done that. Who would have come back, 3 years later, 4 years later, and said, I was being bullied, and I didn't kind of recognize at the time. With my principal's cabinet, I ask this question every year. Talk to me about bullying going on around here. And it's if you were to sit there now, I try to get a good cross-representation. So I try to get some of the kids who are really academically gifted, kids who are athletically gifted, kids who are in Broadway company, get the whole spectrum. We don't have a lot of students of color, so I try to get some of those in there so we have that perspective. We have that conversation every year about bullying, and it's almost unanimous that no, there's really not a lot of bullying going on here. Kids are pretty good about it. I don't necessarily believe that. I think that people, it's like, well, if you go complain about it and it's not cool to complain about it. They're just teasing. They don't mean anything by it. The problem is that it's not the person who's presenting the comments. It's really it's the receiver of those. And so I think part of the issue is that where maybe the pervasiveness is that there's pressure to accept those kinds of comments. That there's pressure to say, well, they're just around. They don't mean anything by it. It's not serious. They're your friends. In some cases, these comments are made by some of their best friends. So we try to stay on top of it as much as we can. Again, they have to come and report it to us. Some of those comments where they said teachers openly heard the N-word and did nothing about it, I can't fathom that. I can't. That doesn't. I mean, obviously, I can't investigate that 3 or 4 years after the case. But I can't imagine there's one staff member that would not call somebody on that. Or someone is making fun of someone for being gay and a teacher saw that and didn't do anything about it. I just can't fathom it. I've been on with this staff for 28 years and it's just not indicative of this staff at all. So could that happen? Or the other thing is, if you remember, is that kids are egocentric. So there could be 30 kids in here and one adult, and every one of those 30 kids thinks I'm looking right at them. It's the reason why we can control 500 kids in the lunchroom with just 4 or 5 adults, because they think that everyone's looking at them. So the teacher may have been across the room, and a comment is made, or in the hall, and they think, well, of course they heard it, because I was right there. But the teacher likely did not hear it, but their perception is that the teacher.
Just as long as that is part of this audit as well, that we're, it's disturbing that they would say stuff like that. But we also know that unless it just happened yesterday,
right?
We can't do anything about it if it happened 3 or 4 years, even a year ago. If the kids aren't here or whatever the circumstances are.
And we do address those at freshman meetings when Deb and I meet with the freshmen. We talk about something happens. You got to let us know. You got to come and talk to us. Don't be afraid. And that's one of the reasons why we do those meetings, is so that these freshmen feel connected to the administration, that they realize that if they have a problem, they come and talk to us. And we're not. I always say this: we're not this big mean ogre. We're kind of friendly. I mean, I guess I look like ogre.
Yeah.
But we're there for you. We're there to support you. We're there to help you, and we're hoping to open up those doors for them, so they're willing to come in if something like that happens, and we encourage that to happen. So I think we're doing a lot, but again, isolated incidents, situations like that can happen, and, you know, we can't be, unless they come and tell us it, there's not a lot we can do.
Okay, anybody else have anything else? Any other questions for the staff on that?
Laura, what is the me for us club? Just in a sentence or two?
I have not visited that
It's
club,
a
but it's a student started that club of interest, and it's about female type topics or female leadership. How do women feel empowered in career choices that are dominated by men, for instance? And are there any topics, or are there anything within our high school that females feel like they're not on an equal standing to males? And if so, what would they do about that?
Thank you.
Who's done the Key Club?
Our Key Club is now called Interact. So that's a heavy service volunteer organization. Key Club is linked with one external organization. Interact is linked with another external organization. And Arrowhead, just in my 6 years, it's flipped back and forth a little bit. But the point of having a very service-minded volunteerism club has always been here.
Okay. Anything else, Laura?
No, that is the end of the
All
report.
right, well done. Okay, committee reports, curriculum, Sue, anything?
Nope, we have a meeting later this month.
Yep.
Okay. Finance and legislation, Craig?
Nope, we have nothing on the immediate horizon.
Do people do anything around here?
Oh, because you
No,
finally have
bill.
this.
Excuse me?
Mr. Chairman, you can knock me, but don't knock your friend next to you, please.
I was looking at you. All right, building and grounds, Ken.
Well, following with the same theme, we didn't have a meeting either, and next was for October 7th.
Okay. All right, well, I do have things here, so.
Oh, you did something.
I did. Okay, first of all, we did meet on September 2nd, and I think I'm just going to have Laura kind of explain this, just so she explains it better than I would. So, go ahead, Laura.
He's learning from you, Craig.
Sure, and yeah, some of this I actually already touched in earlier today. With the committee, we talked through some of the human resources related topics linked to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so there's a couple of different federal acts that allow for safeguards for employees. The FMLA, which is not something new, that's the Family and Medical Leave Act. If someone has a medical issue themselves or their immediate family member in their household, their spouse, their child, or their parent that they care for, as an employee, you're allowed to use sick time, or you're allowed to have a certain number of weeks of leave to take care of health purposes and still retain your job. So that's not something new related to the coronavirus, but there's been some expansion of FMLA linked to COVID-19. And a new act, the Families First Coronavirus Act, or FFCRA, that allows for employees, not just in schools, but in any business where there's more than 50 employees, that allows for employees to take a leave of absence for multiple different reasons. One of them, a couple of them are very much like FMLA. If you are sick, if you test positive for COVID-19, you're allowed to stay home ill and still come back and have a job. The new piece that has not existed before is if you have to take care of your own child for the daycare center closing down or school shutting down, even for half a week, you have the ability as the employee to take a leave of absence to be home with your own child. And then the employer would be paying 2/3 of your salary up to $200 a day. And so I had explained to the committee with these new acts or leave of absences, right now we probably have about 10 staff members that qualify to take a leave. if they take a leave, they're using their sick time, but we're not having our Arrowhead teacher teach. Right now, there is a tremendous shortage of substitutes because so much of our substitute teacher population are retired teachers that come back and work part-time. They love kids, they know how to teach. So in normal circumstances, we've actually been able to find long-term substitutes that, let's say they're teaching several math courses, and in their career, they were math teachers. So the curriculum continues. Now, because there is a shortage of substitutes and many of the retired folks don't want to be in schools in person this year because of the pandemic, our substitutes coming into classrooms may not have the curricular knowledge to keep the academics and the curriculum going. So it could turn into lengthy study halls. And we don't want, for instance, French. We don't want French or Spanish or chemistry to turn into 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks worth of study hall. We want the curriculum to keep going. So we're providing an accommodation for staff members who qualify to take a leave of absence. But if they don't want to, and we want them to teach, they can be teaching remotely. They're still working, but they can be doing that virtually. So for instance, we have a few teachers that half the week they need to be home with their own children because their schools are closed half the week. It's that hybrid model. Rather than having a substitute come in and have study hall 2 or 3 days a week here at Arrowhead, we're having the teacher teach from home. He or she might be here 2 or 3 days a week in the classroom, and then it's 2 or 3 days a week they're teaching. They're being projected up onto the screen, and then we're paying for a classroom monitor, a substitute aide, to be in the room with the students. So supervision is going on. That monitor sets up the computer, gets the technology working. And so that's been allowing Arrowhead to stay open 5 days a week for our students, making that accommodation for some staff members who need it to be working instead of taking a full leave of absence. So that was the gist of that committee meeting, just explaining to the board really unusual circumstances going on.
Sounds like the first whole part of it.
Well, the other part of the discussion dealt with if we had to close for 2 weeks, the whole school had to close for 2 weeks and had to revert completely back to virtual, what's the expectation of our staff as far as, do they still have to report for work here?
Right.
Or can they do it from home? And the general consensus is that the expectation is they're going to report here for work. But following kind of what Laura just said about the different options, they can apply for, let's say, basically a waiver to alternate that. So, but the general theme is we still, if we're closed for 2 weeks, as an example, we want staff coming to work here and teaching from here, giving them options to bring the kids here, be with them, that kind of stuff. So that was the other part of the discussion.
Right.
So.
You just reminded me of something, Bob. There was some discussion, I think, from Adam about setting up a daycare center or so. Can you give us a brief update on what's happening with that?
Yeah, the daycare center idea has fallen short. So our insurance carrier is not keen on us doing it. I talked to some local providers that have daycare centers set up maybe within schools or just like we know up the road. People are keen on it until we run up the flagpole with some of their higher ups and their insurance carriers, and nobody's interested in taking that on. So what we did talk a little bit about at the committee meeting was the possibility if staff members could bring their kids in that, could essentially, if we have to close to go virtual, the odds are that the students' schools are closed to go virtual as well too. They're independent enough because they're school-age kids, because if you're like my kids, I already have daycare provided for them. So they don't need to come in with me, they have a daycare provider. But if they're on their laptops doing their virtual school, then could we make a exception for that and if I'm not going to do that. So we talked about seeing the childcare piece of this and many times as being our biggest threat to having our staff in the building with all the closures going on. So trying to solve that problem in any way we can for our staff members so that we can have them teaching our students in our building.
Okay, any questions on that, on the meeting? Okay. Next is an action item, discussion action to approve the 2019-2020 Arrowhead Teachers of the Year Award recipients, which was North Campus was Kelly Hassler and South Campus was Cheryl Von Linder. They were recognized at our staff breakfast a couple weeks ago.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions on those? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is a discussion action to approve the 2020 Arrowhead Award recipients.
So moved.
There's a motion. Do we have a second?
Oh, remember you didn't pick them.
We have a motion and a
Two
second.
of us, one of us moved it, one of us seconded it. So, it's between Kent and me.
Okay,
I
just,
should win. Just so you know.
okay, before we vote on that, I just wanted to say thank you to, for being nominated for that award. It's very special to me and I appreciate it. I will abstain from voting on that.
I would like to express the same sentiment, and I would also like to abstain from voting.
So you fight better pass it, you might give it back, so.
That might be difficult to do.
Okay, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And 2 abstains. Motion passes. Thank you, everybody. The next meeting is to be determined. And then Donna's not here, so I'm not sure. We believe it'll be the 15th to the 23rd.
I can't comment. Donna and I conversed, and the next policy committee meeting will be October 21st.
Okay.
There was a tentatively scheduled one for September 17th. We will not hold that meeting, and it will be October 21st.
Okay. Other reports, WASB?
Yeah, you're probably getting a bunch of stuff from the WASB with webinars and that kind of stuff. You know the meetings are being held in person. Tomorrow evening, 7:30, I believe. 7 p.m. Our own president, Mr. Robert Rosch, is going to be part of the panel on school safety. And I contacted WASB today to find out how we get into it because I couldn't see any instructions how I get this thing. And they said about 5 p.m. tomorrow evening, there will be a link on the WASB website under webinars. You just click into that and you don't have to register for the seminar. You will probably have to actually log into the website itself, you know, with your user ID and password. Other than that, that's all I've got. Tim, do you have anything? Ted?
That's pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Happy to be your backup.
All right, CISA. Sue?
We didn't meet over the summer. There was a meeting a couple weeks ago I couldn't make, but the rest of the summer was great.
Okay. Under new business employee transactions, we have some contracts and letters of appointment. Looks like they're all no new ones as far as new positions. So entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second.
The motion and a second. Any question on those? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have no donations this time. And then another action item is discussion action to waive the failing grade minimum in the WIA rules of eligibility and Arrowhead's academic requirements for the 2020 spring season athletes to participate in the 2020 fall athletics as allowed by the WIA as a result of the COVID-19 school closures and forced to move to virtual instruction last spring. Laura included a memo on that, kind of explaining it. It's pretty, I think, no nonsense, no brainer, but we have to get school board approval to be able to do the waiver on it, so.
Move we approve it.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and second. Any questions on that? Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, future agenda items. As Kent kind of mentioned, tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, we're participating in a webinar. And it really is more about school safety and law enforcement in schools. So the panel is myself, the school board president from Madison, school board president from La Crosse, and a executive director for a school safety association in Wisconsin. They pre-send us the questions ahead of time, so there's not like a surprise kind of thing. And it's not necessarily a pro or con debate about law enforcement in schools. It's more about if you're going to have them, here's things to consider. You're not going to have them, here's things to consider. And then is there a hybrid you can do a little of one or the other kind of thing. So obviously all the districts are a little bit different in their I guess approaches to it, but it should be interesting. So how it was explained to me is that the 4 panelists and I assume the moderator will be on camera. Nobody else will be on camera. We won't see anybody else. So if there's 2 people watching or 1,000 people watching, we won't see those people other than the panelists. And it's really kind of designed for school boards and administrators. That's kind of the platform behind it from what I was explaining. So, and if it goes south, Bob Butler's the one that suggested I be on this committee, so I will hunt him down and take care of business.
Sometimes internet just cuts out in the middle
Yeah.
of a meeting.
Yeah, so you see me just fall off. The only other follow-up is on this coming Monday at 6:30. I'll be attending and I think Laura's going to come as well.
Yes.
We'll be attending the Heartland Village Board meeting to roll out our partnership plan with the village board first, and we'll take some direction from them. We're anticipating they will then point us back to the Plan Commission for at least part of the discussion on the annexation side. So, and then we'll see how it goes from there. So.
Bob, is there a link that I missed, or is there a link where we could watch that webinar tomorrow?
That's what Kent just said.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to go out to the WSB website and sign in. And I think they have a drop down or something on there about webinars. And click on that, then there'll be a link for that seminar. I think that link will be active about, well, it'll be loaded out to it about 5 p.m. by 5 p.m. tomorrow.
Do you have to log in, or then you can just click on it?
I think you have to actually log into the website to get into the website itself. So I think we go down to the website and ask you for user ID and password before you can get into the website.
Okay, well, just test it, because I was under the impression that you just have to go to the normal WSD website and that it'll be on there to link onto, so.
Just it says registration not required, and there's a link to join it.
Okay, so you probably don't have to log in.
Once you're on the website, you go to the webinars under trainings. At the
So
top.
you didn't even have to sign into the website itself?
It says no registration required, and then the link to join is right below it. I'm sure it
I don't know
will.
that I've ever had a login.
I went into it today, I didn't remember what it was, I figured it out, that was a standard nomenclature and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I clicked on it, it asks you to enter your email address and your name, and then join the webinar.
Okay, so that's pretty simple. Because I think it's just generally open to the public, it's just the target audience, it's generally school boards and administrators. So. Does anybody else have anything?
Is there anything going on with homecoming or any of that? I mean, I know a lot is going on just to get back to school, but, you know, some of those activities is you're doing co-curriculars and sports, and any thoughts on that?
Right, those are, homecoming is actually planned by student groups, and so those advisors are working on it. Greg, I don't know if you want to give a brief update.
To talk about it. So it's likely that they will not be having a dance, which, they just can't go away. So I've said to them, I was going to communicate it out today, But then I said, you know what, let them talk about it. Maybe they can come up with some creative way to have a virtual dance of some sort. And I said, you know, we talked about even, well, you could go, you could split it up and put up big screens. You could have freshmen in the commons, the sophomore, or freshmen in the AP room, sophomores in the gym at here. North Campus, you can put the seniors in one gym and the juniors in the other gym. The problem's going to be is they're still going to go like this, you know, when the dancing starts, and you know they just kind of. So I said, let them mull it over and see what they're thinking. Still planning on doing, trying to do some type of a reverse parade where they would have the floats all out, and then the cars could drive by it, and they would probably throw candy at the cars. Or have little, I said, why don't you little bags of candy, just take a bag of candy for each kid, you know, that you could give them. So they're talking about that, doing a reverse parade. They're still going to they want to do some homecoming, a virtual homecoming, a pep rally, where they have some activities and do some things, and kids could watch it from their rooms, you know, in their classroom. We wouldn't bring, you know, 1,000 people in the gym, but in their classroom, then they would do some things, and we would bring the activities and have a band in the gym and do all those things. So they're working on some of those things to have some of the activities.
Dress-up days can still happen.
Depending on all the dress-up days. So yeah, they're working on some things and seeing how creative they can be.
What is the date for homecoming?
October 11th,
Yeah, I think so.
the week that previous,
Oh,
it's Saturday.
Everybody got Laura sent out the memo on attending games. It's basically, we start now 2 tickets per player, which means we won't get on the field unless you're on the chains or something, but, and then, or you can stand at the fence and
Right, so
stop you
that,
from doing that, but.
yeah, it's the full Classic 8. Decided that we do want spectators, but it's going to start up slowly. So each athlete, each band member, dance team, anyone that's involved would get 2 tickets that they can share. Most parents are presuming they would get the tickets, but one never knows. Sometimes girlfriends or boyfriends are more important than parents, but.
My son's already advised me that I have to find another way to get to the volleyball game, because he wants to give one to his girlfriend and one to his mother, so.
I bet you'll find a way.
Yeah, you'll figure it out.
So it'll be 2 tickets per student participant, and then that will be reevaluated every couple of weeks to see is it working. So for instance, our football stadium obviously can hold a lot more people and still socially distance than our swimming pool. So it may differ. We're trying to stay consistent as a Classic 8 conference, but yet every district has different facilities. So where some areas it might happen that football ends up expanding to 4 tickets or 6 tickets, or I don't know, I don't want to presuppose what the decisions will be. But every couple of weeks it'll be reevaluated. Can it be expanded? Or in some areas like our pool that is so small and there's so little seating as it is, that may never expand more than 2 tickets. And even with 2 tickets, parents may need to rotate in and out for their child's swim event, even to be able to fit. So.
Okay.
Quick question.
We have a question.
Anything planned for Friday for 9/11? Will we do a moment of silence or anything, Greg?
Yeah, we'll do it. We always do moment of silence. Yeah. Shane usually read something off. We have someone on the place who can read something off.
You hear that, Dave? They're planning on something for the students.
Yep, so over the PA system, there's a moment of silence, and then I always post something on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well.
Great, awesome, thank you.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So,
Second.
All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Thanks,
Stay
Dave.
safe, everyone.
Thank you, soon.